Welcome back to Enlighten Up. You're listening to episode 22, Light Language, Lisa's Channeling, and a Heart and Third Eye Opening Transmission with Jamye Price. We've talked about light language on earlier episodes, and today you guys are going to get a full intro into what it is, what's the purpose, and why are more people starting to speak the language, especially when very few people are able to interpret it, at least in the beginning. We brought on Jamye Price, the author of Opening to Light Language, to take us on this journey and also bring forth a beautiful transmission of a heart and third eye opening. So stick around for that because it comes in towards the end and it's a really beautiful transmission. Also, you know that Lisa speaks light language. We've talked about it a little bit on the show. Well, today you're gonna finally be able to hear her speak. We're gonna get into all of that today, so let's jump into episode 22 and get right to it. Welcome back to Enlighten Up. You're listening to episode 22, and I am here with my co-hosts Lisa and Michael, and today we have a very special guest with us, Jamye Price. She is the author of the book Opening to Light Language, and she is an international energy healer, channel, and teacher. She's developed a healing modality called crystalline soul healing, which is a powerful alchemical template of soul progression. In addition, Jamye channels healing energies in the form of light language, which are transformational creation codes that further align you with your soul. And she teaches both of these modalities worldwide. So welcome to our show, Jamye. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. This has been a very much anticipated show for myself, but I think even more so for Lisa, right?
Yes, I'm really excited to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so we've discussed a little bit about light language on our show, but we have part of our audience probably doesn't even know what light language is. So maybe we could just jump into some of the basics.
Yes. So light language is something that's very natural to us because we are all channels. If you are alive, you are receiving energy, you are emitting energy, and channeling is something that anyone can do. So light language is just a unique form of channeling. It's a form of communication that's not as linear as our memorized words and choosing words. So light language itself is just a form of divine communication or expanded communication that's natural for us because our linear mind works from what's known and what's understood, and then we choose our expression from that. But light language is a communication that is not bound by those linear terms.
Oh, wow. So how did you come across light language? How did it start for you?
So I was not a psychic child. I didn't grow up psychic, and it was not something that I was around or familiar with. And when I was in my late teens, I started having psychic phenomenon happen to me occasionally, and it would come in like a thought in my head. And it would end up being a thought that would be so random that I couldn't have thought it, but it would be proven within a few hours. And so the opening was starting to happen in my late teens, but the light language itself didn't come through until many years later. So I spent about a little less than 10 years going through a progression of psychic opening. And it would come in different spurts where things would open up, but I couldn't quite control it. I couldn't make it happen or not happen. And then in my mid to late 20s, there was another big leap of psychic advancement, and I started seeing auras. I started recognizing that I had been hearing my guides talk to me, and I thought I was just having some weird thoughts going on in my head. But after that point, when I recognized what was happening, I was more attentive to what was occurring. So I started doing healing work on myself. I started doing healing work on others because my guides were talking to me about how to do healing work. So in my early 30s, I had already been working on people that wanted healing work from me. And when about that time frame, I came across someone that does an axiotonal alignment. And when I had an axiotonal alignment, that's when the light language started happening to me. I had never been exposed to it. I had heard of speaking in tongues, you know, I mean, I probably saw, like, there's some old movie, I think, that mentions it, that talks about a healing journey that someone had. Sorry, I can't remember the name of that movie, but it was like a movie from the late 70s, early 80s about a woman that went through some kind of opening. So I had heard the term, but I'd never seen it or experienced it. And at that point, after I'd had the axiotonal alignment, that's when my hands started moving around when I was working on clients. And that was the beginnings of light language for me, even though I didn't recognize it at the time. I would ask my guides what was happening, and they would sometimes talk to me in a way that I was accustomed to, like talking about whatever was occurring for the client. But every once in a while, they would give me this cryptic answer, like, there are this many people on earth that do this. And that number would go up and down. And I would ask them, do what? And they wouldn't give me an answer. So they wouldn't say, you're doing light language, or, you know, this is what's happening. They would just say what was occurring, or give me that cryptic answer so that I would discover and choose on my own. And it took me about 1.5 years of doing that, somewhere around there. And then eventually I went to this workshop with a friend, and that teacher, even though it wasn't about light language, she had some written light language there. And that's when I knew, oh my God, that's what my hands are doing. They're writing that in the air. So that unfolding was slow. And then it took me a while to come to terms with speaking light language, because that was even weirder than when someone is just laying there with their eyes closed, and they aren't seeing that you're moving your hands all around. But the speaking light language was a lot harder for me to accept, because I was afraid I was going to have to, I don't know, become some kind of permanent weirdo, which I might be, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, that happened to you, right? You started signing when you started speaking it as well.
Yeah, when it first came on, it just, for me, it was just like a freight train, sort of out of the blue. Like I was about to lie down and take a nap, and I just started, speaking light language, and it was just coming through fast and furiously. And I was with someone that I didn't know that well, and they gave me this look like, oh my God, like, what is wrong with you? And I felt just like an incredible amount of joy. And I knew, I had heard of speaking in tongues, and I had heard of light language, so I wasn't all that surprised. Mm-hmm. But I had, at that moment, I couldn't control it at all. So it just like kept coming out, and I kept getting these messages that the person that I was with was supposed to just listen to me. I kept telling this person is now my husband, but so I kept saying, Brian, you're just supposed to listen to me. Just listen, like, I'm okay. And then but I couldn't get control over my own tongue to say it in English. But they kept telling me, just tell him that, he's to listen. And then I started signing. So as I was trying to shut my tongue down, they just came through my hands. So then I was just like signing furiously, but I was able to get then control over my tongue and tell him, it's okay. Like, just relax. I'm not possessed by the devil here. And ever since then, it's just been something that is part of me. And I'm, reading your book has helped me just, you said, I wanted to ask you said that sometimes it just comes on spontaneously as part of like a soul contract. Can you explain that?
Yes. So because it's something that anyone can do. It's very natural to us to communicate with the divine that's in us. It's very natural for us to communicate in nonlinear ways, but it's not something that's well known or something that can feel comfortable for everyone. And when it comes through spontaneously like that, there is a soul contract, or your higher self is allowing that through because it's an experience that's going to benefit you in some way. And as you experienced, you didn't have immediate choice of shutting it down. Like, your tongue was just going, your mouth was just moving, it was just bursting forth. But with some effort, you could stop it. And if you really wanted to, you could shut it down. You could really set that pure intent and hold to it that you don't want to experience that, and you won't experience it. But it's something that's so beautiful and so profound that when someone is in tune enough with their own emotions that they can sense when they're safe and when they're not, that when that experience occurs and they're in tune enough to feel what they're connecting with, that's the most profound part, because there is an inherent love that you can feel when you're transmitting. But that experience isn't always clear for everyone. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've because it came on like that so spontaneously, I've had to, try to understand what was kind of going on. And for a while, I felt like it was just constantly in my head. Like, at any moment, I could be speaking light language. And every time I tried to fall asleep, or in the middle of the night, I would wake up speaking it, or, as I was waking. And it got to the point where I felt like I just needed to, feel it more and feel like, is this good? I felt like maybe there are energies that are using this language in not a good way, which I had been advised by a psychic and a healer, because I wasn't, feeling that great. And so I was able to shut it down for a while, probably like a month or so. I just chose, not to let it come through until I could really connect and feel that it was right for me. And so I've done that recently, and now I've allowed it to come back, but I feel like it's under much more controlled now, where, and when I do speak it, sometimes I just cry. Like, it feels like just so much love is coming through. Not necessarily that I can interpret it, but I've been focusing more on trying to feel what it's saying, rather than before I was getting a little frustrated that I didn't understand the interpretation of it.
Yes. And this is part of why it's coming through so much more now. It's just expanding so quickly. And why you even had that experience of getting more in tune with yourself and feeling that uncomfortableness with it feeling out of control, and then helping to shape it into something that felt more comfortable to you. And I'm so glad that you had that experience of knowing that you get to exert your free will and say no, and then discover your inner truth and make a choice. Because the things that are happening now, and light language is a profound indicator of those things, the things that are happening now is an expansion or an evolution that humanity is experiencing, where more people are opening up to things that have always been there, like psychic senses or healing capabilities or light language, that we can see aspects of the history of it. We know in the Western world, we know it as speaking in tongues, and that very few and specific religious sects have kept this practice. And yet it's not something that's accepted. It's not something that is verifiable and provable easily and consistently by our current scientific method, although there have been some scientific studies on what's occurring with the brain when we're doing light language. So it's not something that's a comfortable place for so many people, but we're having to come to terms with things that weren't as obvious to us because we are going through some physical changes. And the brain changes that are occurring are a big part of that. We know we have conscious focus and we have an unconscious mind. We have things that we can't quite explain. There's parts of the brain usage that we just don't understand with our current scientific methods. And what's happening is we're having to deal with some of these natural functionalities that are coming online because they're expanding so much. And that non-linear aspect is something that we've been dealing with in different ways. We would notice that more with artistic type of things or more conceptual things. And as we start to blend those two, we're opening up to new gifts that were always there and accessible all throughout the world. There's plenty of references to this in all of the indigenous cultures, the ancient Chinese and Sanskrit. There's references to speaking in tongues in different ways. But this is something that's opening up now because we are expanding in a way that we can access more of these non-linear or non-focused types of communication. So it's going to continue to grow, but for that to be comfortable, humans have to really start to discern their own choices and utilizing more of their energetic boundaries and letting go of some of the control that's not helpful and emphasizing some of the control that is helpful. Because what was happening with you, Lisa, is we're having an experience that was part of your path, but then you also got to readjust that with your free will and make that clear choice for yourself. And that's what humanity is really having to deal with, is their boundaries and the things that are known and unknown and logical and illogical. So it's a really exciting point, but not always easy.
Yeah, and you know, I have quite a few questions for you, but one is, you know, in your book, you talked about the different types of languages, the angelic, elemental, galactic, and, you know, and I'm curious as to what type of language I'm speaking, but I also know that I speak several languages. And I went over the summer, I went to Mount Rushmore, to the Black Hills. And when I was there, the light language that was coming through was clearly American Indian. Mm-hmm. And my husband says, I swear, if you look up the Lakota Indian who, you know, or in that area, that's probably what you were speaking. Mm-hmm. And it was just obvious that I was speaking some type of an American Indian language. But I find it really interesting how it shifts depending on, you know, where I am or what the situation is.
Yes.
Like how many different languages come through.
Yes. And there are two main types of light language. There's a technical term, glossolalia, which is languages that are unknown to Earth, and then xenoglossia, which is languages that are unknown to the channel, but are common Earth languages or accessible Earth languages. So what I find under those is that you are typically tuning in to languages that have a soul reference for you. So the languages, whether it's galactic or angelic or elemental, those are soul contract type of languages, or languages that are connected with some sort of Akashic lineage that you have. And then the ancient Earth languages, or the future Earth languages, but those we wouldn't have a reference for, The ancient earth languages are generally going to be connected in with a more particular experience or a very direct and obvious lineage. So when you first start channeling, what generally happens is you're channeling languages that are more specific to you. And then as you experience it more, you're going to find that you start accessing languages that are either specific to another person or specific to a place or specific to a situation. So it really gets exciting when you start to see some of the different things that are coming forth. And then with more experience, you start to recognize connections of languages that don't have an earth reference, but you recognize that other people are speaking a similar language to you. It gets really interesting when you start developing more of that inner courage and empirical evidence for yourself that keeps you expanding.
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating, but there's also part of me that just kind of wonders, like, what's the point? As I'm speaking this, and I guess I'm still new to it, so I'm not healing anyone. I've actually had this incredible backache for like a year and a half that I just feel like I've done everything in my power to get rid of, which just does not seem to want to let go of me. And and I even using light language to try to heal myself hasn't worked. So I'm like, what's the point in this? Why am I even doing this?
Mm-hmm. And the point is it's a moving target from depending on the time, but the point is helping us to expand our mental capacity between what's linear and what's non-linear. So when you're transmitting light language, whether it's verbal or written or signed, when you're transmitting light language, you are communicating in a way that's bypassing some of those mental limitations or the mental constructs that we build. And so you're relaying information that the higher self knows completely, because the higher self is just the higher frequency version of you that's outside of this physical bandwidth that we're within. That you're allowing information to flow that is affecting you in ways that are beneficial, even if they're not as linear or pinpointable as our verbal words are. So I could say something like, I'm going to run energy right to your back. And it's not going to be any more or less effective than you're going to allow that flow to occur. The same thing occurs with light language. It's still having to deal with what you're wanting to let go from a human standpoint and a higher self standpoint, what you're willing to change from a human standpoint, what's ripe for that time. And yet, as you're connecting in with that higher frequency information that's just outside of our linear bandwidth, it has the effect of benefit, even if that's not always obvious in the moment. From the information that I get with light language, the light language itself is pure, but the channel may not be. The person that's transmitting it may have their own issues or challenges or fears or limitations that are limiting what the light language can do or will do. But even with that, it's still going to flow that benefit that's available in the moment. It just may unfold over a different time frame. And I find often people are expecting a lot from the energetics in the moment, because miracle and immediate things do happen. But especially in this time frame where humanity really has lessons of empowerment, it's going to be more about the path of progress rather than so much immediate change.
Jamie, you call like light language transformational creation codes. And I know that light language, it obviously it's carrying light, and light carries energy. Not energy, sorry, information. How does this affect our DNA? And could you also go into how our DNA is changing from carbon-based to crystalline and what that actually means?
Yes. So let me get to the first one first. So it's called light language because light carries information. Light is a carrier vehicle for information. And light has physical properties that we can see with our eyes. We can differentiate in color, but it also has wave properties. It's not all physical. And so on a quantum level, it is not as linear as we are. And if you think of the language as information and the light as the carrier vehicle for that information, it is just a broader form of communication. Or it's nonlinear, it's vibrational, and we have those aspects as well. So our DNA, for example, there are chemical components to it. We can track them, we can name them, we can observe them, and even work with them in some very physical ways. But there are non-physical aspects of the DNA as well. And some of this is even being worked with some in different ways with different scientific methods, that observing the colors of DNA or the light that DNA emits or the patterning that DNA creates, that we're starting to understand more of the nonlinear aspects of DNA. And light language works directly with that because that information that is transmitted is responsive, it's subtle, it's non-physical, and so the subtle aspects of you are very responsive to that. And the DNA is part of that. So there have been studies that show that the DNA itself is physically affected by your thoughts, your emotions, your intent. And this is similar in the aspect that light language, because there's a subtle non-physical component to it, that intent, your DNA is resonant to that intent of the light language. That light language is the information of healing. It is the information of the broader aspect of you. And so it has a very healing or activating effect on the DNA. Now, there's a lot of information out there about the DNA changing from carbon-based to crystalline-based. And in my information, in fact, my healing modality is named Crystalline Soul Healing because back in 2005, I was guided to name it that. And it is, from my information, it is not that we are going to transform out of carbon-based into some other crystal form. And I know there are people that talk about that. I just get different information. From what I've been shown, what we are moving into, and even the reason that my healing modality was called crystalline, or part of the reason, is we are starting to honor more of our ability to transmit and receive and to structure. That as we have a clearer structure, that we are more open to the natural functionality that's locked within our body. So in my information, that crystalline aspect is really about clarifying your own focus, your intent, your awareness, so that you are fully utilizing the power of your structure.
When you say repatterning, does that kind of tie into, I might be wrong, so please correct me if I am, but that the DNA is kind of restructuring into more sacred geometry, like the geometry is, the patterning there is changing, or?
Well, Geometry or shape is something that is, your DNA is constantly moving. And so that patterning is shifting into more clarity as you handle your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual clarity. So its own resonance becomes much clearer and freer as you clear and free yourself. So the repatterning is physical in nature, because your physical body will be affected, but it's more about the shifting of yourself so that your resonance becomes different and your DNA responds to that. Did that help?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Since we haven't heard from Michael yet, Michael, what's going on in your brain?
A lot of this stuff's above my head, to be honest with you. I mean, I've seen Lisa speak in her light language, and I was with Lisa. I'm like, what's the point of this? You know, if you don't understand, obviously, as a human or whatever, if you don't understand what's literally coming out of your mouth, it's like I'm kind of confused on the sidelines of like, okay, well, what's the whole point of this whole thing? But even with your reason of what the point is, I was still kind of like, I still don't get it. And I mean, I think Lisa brought up like the fact that she felt like this language that was coming out when I saw her during one of her episodes was not, I mean, I don't know what else to call it. Was not perhaps good for her, or she wasn't sure if it was good for her because of her other, psychics or whatever. Is that possible? Can there be like a really negative things out there that will be trying to utilize you and, speaking?
Yeah. So what I have seen as far as like, can negative energies come through and speak light language? What I have seen is no, they cannot, but the person can be negative. And so you could interact with some light language where you're like, oh, I really like this. And you could interact with someone else doing light language and be like, oh, something doesn't feel right. And you're responding to that channel. The reasoning for that I was given is because there cannot be conscious agreement of what the words say yet. We do not have that full interpretation capacity, that we cannot give up our free will from a human standpoint because of that. So for instance, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, there's only love. No, there are entities and energies that are unhealthy for us, and you should not just be opening to anything at any time. You have to really be clear on your own boundaries and do your own ego work if you're going to channel energies in many different ways. But the light language cannot, because we don't know the language, we cannot give away our free will or get deceived with it. So what I see happening with a lot of channelers that are connecting with negative energies, they're working with energies that are boosting their ego, and so they're not clear in their own intent, and they're able to bring through those energies, or they're just completely unaware and they aren't taking that control of their own boundaries. Light language does not have that same capacity for someone to give up their free will through deception.
Okay, that was definitely a concern I think we all had, right, Lisa? Because you just don't know what's being said. And Lisa and I have both experienced deception from negative energies, making soul contracts through deception.
Yep.
So we were wondering if that was possible through light language, since none of us even know what we're saying or hearing. Yeah. So
that is my information, that we cannot give up our free will to it consciously, because we cannot consciously guarantee the words. And when you start experiencing it more and you start to fine tune some of those feelings, because at first, and this is why I was so grateful my experience came through the hands first when people had their eyes closed, and I was already prepared for that discourse with my guides. If it had opened up all of a sudden at that point in time, I'm sure I would have shut it down, because that just would be too freaky. And you're still conscious, your logical mind is going, what is this? Can I trust it? How do I know? And so I think it's healthy to have those questions. We should be asking those in probably a lot more different situations than we do. But it's healthy to wonder those things, but you have a natural discernment system of what's good for you and what's not, but that system has to be honed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important. And unfortunately, I run across a lot of people that have talked to a psychic or talked to someone, and they're like, oh, that's evil. When do they really know? Because rightly so, any normal person watching that's not sensing it would go, that is weird. That is crazy. That is unknown. So, I mean, everything Michael was saying, I'm like, yeah, you should be feeling that way. I mean, who just experiences that and goes, oh, this is all perfect. And unless it comes in a way that you feel so safe and so clear with what's occurring. So,
well, yeah, I actually wanted to speak to something you said, Michael, about like, if you don't even know what's being said, what's the point? I believe that our bodies understand sounds and tones that maybe our brain doesn't know how to interpret, and our body responds to that in different ways. Like, for instance, if you think about opera, if you listen to certain opera songs, I have no idea what they're saying, but I'm sometimes moved to absolute tears, and I don't know why. It's just the sounds are so beautiful, and it's clearly triggering something within my body to respond that way. And I feel like there's that aspect within the language that we may not always know what we're hearing, but it doesn't mean our body doesn't hear it and understand it. Just like Lisa says, she feels the love even though she doesn't know what's coming through.
And I've been able to discern more, I feel more in control now that, like I said, I had that experience where I wasn't sure, and, a psychic or people had advised me just to be careful and, make sure that I knew what was coming through and to pay more attention to how I felt. And so now I feel, safe. I feel empowered. I know that it's okay.
Yeah. And I think that's good advice, to question things and check in. And I love your story of feeling that bursting through and experiencing that, and taking some time to slow it down and get back in tune with what you want, and then allowing that flow. In my own journey, I found something similar that I talk about in the book, where it used to just feel like it was always pressing on me to push forth, especially, when I was not all the time at the grocery store, but if I would go to like a class, a channeling or something where energy was running, I had to sit in the back because my body was going to start flopping all around and sound was going to want to come out. So what I finally found over time is, when I surrendered into that with my intent of, I don't want to be a weirdo that can't go places, and I also don't want to disrupt someone else's class. So I have some boundaries here. Once I did that, it just flowed so smoothly. I would sit in the back and it would whisper from time to time. My hands would gently move. It would not disturb anyone, and I wasn't feeling that constant pressure. So we do have free will choice, and you get to set some parameters in your own life.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that. I feel like I have much more control, and it used to come through and just make my whole body like convulse, like I practically, jumping off the bed as it was coming through me. And I feel like I've learned to even control that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Lisa, did you want to see if you could, like, one of the questions that we've had, Jamie is wondering, what is Lisa saying? Is there any way that you might be able to interpret anything or something that, because I know it's not all interpretable, But that,
or just connect to my energy. I mean, I know you're, intuitive and you're an energy healer, and you may not even need me to say anything to know. So
yeah, it's possible that I will know some information, and it's possible I won't. So I'm completely open to either way. And so yeah, go ahead and do some light language, and we'll see if I get any information.
Okay. It's been dying to talk to you. It's gonna get my tongue to work correctly, Aina ka kus nikati kong kutus mo kuku finikiti chumti tai kaichus nikatai nei aina hilkuf mani nai tai tis nukutus justikati inkai chai tai tai isakata kongu finimini nai tai sai konku te tai sakatai tai chai te inahe kate in te ukusamanai nai ichon unkati inkasakati inkai Ainai chonku samani nai chonku fopoti in te sai ono hukana ije inkai isaka tohunku jesun katai ana honko te saka tai in chai tonku sinini nai tai unkahi tai usamani nai cho unkuchu ukuti sikati kai itai inahiti sikatai in chai. I'm gonna stop, but
Good. Do you have anything that you wanted to say?
No, I just
Okay, good.
I've been speaking this other language, and then this one just came through with you, so I'm like, okay, so that's,
yeah.
Oh, and it's 4:44.
I mean, I recognize I have spoken that one before, but I haven't heard it for a little while.
Yes. So what I was sensing in there is, one, there was some kind of Syrian Orion blend that was occurring. Those languages are somewhat connected in with that, those galactic lineages.
I've been told I'm from Alta Centurion.
Nice.
That I'm
and yet there was a blending of some other languages that kept coming through. It wasn't just one consistent language. And there were even times where you were going into just a physical readjustment to switch back into another language.
Yeah, I could feel that, the energy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I wasn't getting a direct translation, like this is what the topic was, but I was feeling, and still am actually, this energy expansion in the crown chakra that is kind of crescent moon shaped, as if the back of my head had a little crescent moon sitting right on top of it. And a lot going on in the second chakra. So the information had to do with that particular resonance. So if you think of like the color scale that we see within the chakra, the traditional chakra system, that frequency is resonant with those areas, and a lot of heat. And they do want to say that the transmission wasn't about speaking to me. It was about what others were going to hear. It's for the audience, technically. So very cool. Good. What were you sensing?
Not really very much. I didn't really sense anything, but I felt those definitely waves of energy and like switchings, like clicking from one thing to the other, sort of. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I've had this back thing going on, which is in my L3, 4, and 5, and I've just felt like I don't know. I guess I'm asking you to help me with that, or help me understand it, because I just feel like everything is so connected, but I can't quite understand how.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. What I'm feeling in those connected with your back in those particular areas, it's almost like there's a pressure there that wants to release. Mm-hmm. And so even with the chakra, there's some blockage there that's going to release over time and give you some more of that clarity. I'm sorry, give you some more of that freedom, where you're not feeling the physical pain. One of the things that is particular to the back thing, we tend to, and this is one of the benefits of light language too, by the way, we tend to go, okay, well, I have a back problem, so I have to fix my back. And that's not completely wrong. You're feeling the pain. You need to have relief in that area for so many valuable, valid reasons. But the path to that purer healing may not start with the back. And this is one of the things that I'm sensing with your issue, that there's actually more of a heart healing that's occurring that will then facilitate the healing for the back. And a little bit through the throat, the expression is coming up now as well.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I meant, where I feel like there's just so many things that are connected. I know it's not necessarily about my back, but yes, I do have to, take steps to try to heal my back. But I've always believed that pain is just an indication that there's something else that, needs to be healed or is off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what I've been trying to determine, I'm taking care of my back, but at the same time, I'm also trying to figure out what is it, mentally and emotionally and spiritually that I can do to help.
Think about it this way, because the heart is coming up really strongly in alignment with that healing. Think of it less about figuring it out and more about just supporting your flow. And it doesn't mean you won't figure out, or you should never look at those aspects of it. But in this particular case, you're doing the things that you need to do physically for your back, and let the healing flow more rather than have to figure it out to fix it.
Okay.
And this is that path of light language where so much of what we're experiencing now is a less direct path to figuring it out, but it doesn't mean that we won't be figuring things out.
I mean, we're such 3D humans. We want, and for the, our audience and everything, and, for most people is we need to be able to put things in tangible terms, scientific, terms, or be able to prove something or be able to see it. And I think it's really hard for us to let go and just let things kind of happen or sort of like run in the background without having to be able to define it or be able to write it or be able to see it.
Yeah. 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 It's the big trust journey.
Yes.
And you don't just throw those things out and go, oh, well, then I'll never define anything. But it's a blending into the unknown, the unfigureoutable so far, and then finding that journey and letting that journey unfold of what is able to be figured out. And so that letting go of that need to know, need to define, mental focus, it takes some effort, but it's definitely worth the effort, because it's about our expansion and honoring both aspects of that, the mental aspect and the emotional aspect, or the less defined aspect, or the unknown.
I think it's like you said the word trust, and I think that that's really important. And I think with faith, Nicole and I talk about it all the time. It's just trying not to, just simply trusting and knowing that everything's going to work out, and not feeling like that we always have to have this security blanket of knowing exactly where we're going to end up, and why we're going there, and what it all means, and just trust that it's unfolding the way that it's supposed to be unfolding. Yes.
And not blind trust, not, oh, I'm just going to walk across the street whenever I feel like it.
Right. To have the
but the wise trust that is that inner discernment of, this feels safe, and so I'm going to move forward some, even though I don't know where it's going to end up or how or when yet.
Right.
but I trust that it's going to unfold properly. And that's that inner journey that is, it's what this time is about. And it's a blend of receiving support from others, but really amplifying that inner support. And a perfect example of that is what you went through with light language.
And, I have to say for our audience, the title of your book is Opening to Light Language. Is that right?
Yes.
I hope I said that right.
Yes.
But it's not all about light language. And your book to me was just amazing because it's about just, those other things that we were talking about. And you have so much more in there than about light language that I think is so useful, would be so useful to so many people. So I just want our audience to know that you don't have to really care about light language or want to learn to speak it to benefit from your book.
Thank you. Thank you. In that forum, I wanted to give more of the background of why this is opening up now, what science is pointing to it, even though it's not purely definable, but that all of that deep background that if you talk about too much of it too soon, it's just like, oh, you lost me.
And you talk about other things, you talk about, different affirmations and protections, and you talk about different dimensions and, so many other things that are useful.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. The subtitle, Humanity's Expansion into Multidimensional Communication, that kind of speaks to that, because I wanted something that really helped define what this weird journey is about. And light language may not be part of that journey for some people, but they're likely experiencing some other things, like a desire to meditate or some shift in their relationships or their intuitive, their dreams. We're going through a lot of change, and light language is just one aspect of that change, and it may not be on everyone's path in this particular time frame.
Michael, do you have any questions that have come up, or are you still like blank slate?
Fairly blank. I mean, it's interesting stuff to me. Don't get me wrong, but it's just hard to relate to.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that has really kept me open about light language is it's not for everyone. And if you're not drawn to it, that's totally okay. I love exposing people to light language, and yet I have no desire to shove it on anyone. Right. We all have such different, diverse paths that it's not necessarily for everyone at the time. And yet sometimes it's in our experience for reasons unknown at the time.
I have two sons. They're in their 20s, and one of my sons says, oh, that's really cool. Like, I'd like to hear it, kind of thing. And my other son says, don't ever speak that in front of me again. Yes. I don't want really any part of all of that.
Yep.
Jamie, would you be willing or interested in doing a transmission of light language for us in the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So just so that we cover this part, I always like to let people know that light language always concedes to your higher self. I'm never doing anything to you. I'm not choosing for you. I allow the information to flow through, and your human self gets to make choice and your higher self makes choice. So light language always concedes to your higher self. Your higher self will decide what you're going to release, what you're going to activate. And then your human self, what I recommend is you focus on what am I sensing? What am I feeling? And a little less focus on what do those words mean? And more focus on just noticing anything like physical sensations, any emotions or thoughts that pop up that are a little unusual, any psychic senses like seeing colors or sensing a being, anything like that. Just observe and see what comes forth. We're actually going to do this transmission. May not be the only thing that it's about, but some of the things that I'm sensing coming up ahead of time is a lot of heart opening and third eye activation. Jem sura makarat andora sat ilo hut naut atesh okorum. Dan ish duranesuk turmahikiaruma sesel nim shursayet un. Kunsaya staru saru katamat il. Den sura naktayamat urashtayaru sukwa. Kun sondoshtoro sukmat un deash durasayid al inimek ukuam. Zanu ushdarina suktayat Satoramat. Saishan surane kurataim. Bandurayet ukuarat al ashtoranasuk taimat Ban santurashtayaro sakal irumakam. Gan osoroштoro sokurat nim surkut ni ia. Chensut nahuk akya. Kutsaishtan durmasakayamat Kamuratat ilarushtario kusuk turmat in. San eshtoranasuk taim. Sukaim shatua tam kua. Kutsaima. Jetsurkut nihikiaru etel im. Nam surame kuratain eshtur sakua him ta. When durasat ilot nemakuam kom shanturamasiak ukua. Good, good. Taking another deep breath. Good. So I want to share some of the things that I was experiencing during that. But remember, your experience can be different if your higher self is releasing or activating something different for you. What I was experiencing was the third eye opening was really focused on in the beginning. And in some ways, that physical process of opening can sometimes feel uncomfortable, almost like a pinching or headache or something that's slight, but it's what helps open that, or it helps open that third eye processing. So, well, let me refine that. Sorry. The headache itself isn't helping to open it. It's just an effect of when that opening is occurring. That third eye process that was occurring has a lot to do with connecting us more into our soul aspect or our broader aspect. We tend to want to focus in the physical, and that apparatus is meant to help us connect with things that are more subtle. And so as you're doing that, expect that opening occurs in ways that expand your expectations gradually. So the second part that really stood out, there was a lot of heart opening that was happening. And in that one, I was feeling a lot of anchoring more of the self into the physical body. So there was a second chakra experience that almost felt like strength that is helping to maintain more of that personal vibration so that your heart is safe to open. Then in the final part that stood out, I was feeling again that energy that I was feeling in the crown chakra when Lisa was doing a light language transmission. That was part of helping to open the vessel so that the third eye and that heart anchoring can happen more. So it was really cool seeing that tie in.
That was beautiful. Thank you. I think I already know my answer, but Michael, did you feel anything?
I mean, I got like I don't know. It's always weird when I hear this kind of stuff. It's not my first time, but I got kind of like goose pimpling at the beginning. and I had my eyes closed too. And I saw really intense red at the beginning. That later on, like the second half, like the red, like was enveloped by green for some reason. That's kind of like what I was seeing with my eyes closed. So that's what I got.
Nice.
Ooh, yeah, green, heart chakra.
Yeah.
I definitely, it was all third eye for me. I still feel it. I definitely got like the pinching and kind of like a pressure on my third eye. And as you finished and you were talking, it started to get a little lighter and turn into like almost like a very subtle vortex feeling of light tingling, of energy kind of in like coming out of the, like beyond my physical body. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, I was feeling that. And also, well, actually I'll say this after. I'll let Lisa, say what she felt.
I just really felt the heart part, the opening, almost like a crushing of a, I have this feeling of like a crushing of a, like a barrier that was like around my heart, almost like it broke open, like enabling my heart to release. That's really what I felt.
Nice.
That was really beautiful. I don't know if Michael, you got this, because I know Lisa doesn't watch the show, but I totally was taken to Khaleesi, Game of Thrones, when she speaks in her, what's the language, Michael?
Dothraki?
Yes, like, well,
You're not, Khaleesi, yeah, Dothraki, or Valerian, you mean?
yeah, like when she
Oh,
sometimes was speaking, it had a similar sound like that. It instantly flashed in my mind.
Nice. I've never seen Game of Thrones, but I have heard of Dothraki. I saw an interview a long time ago with one of the guys that creates their languages. And even in the book, I talked about Tolkien with the languages that he brought through, the Elven language that he brought through for his books. And, he technically worked in this little society. They gathered and they would create languages based on ancient languages. And he was fascinated with that. And what I felt from his work was that he had very naturally and intuitively distilled some ancient language out of there. And there are instances where I find this happening in some of the movies and television shows. I'm a big Star Trek fan, so sometimes they access parts of languages, and other times they just completely make them up. But I love that that show is creating some languages that are tying us into older things. And then I just found out recently that Tolkien actually had a lot of, he really followed a lot of esoterics and felt like he was bringing back something that was ancient in our history. And so that
was like,
we're doing.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings was my favorite book as a kid. Loved the whole series. I just couldn't get enough of it. And I always was fascinated with the languages that were spoken throughout the books.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole idea of the Elven, the Elven, I don't know what to call, community, generation, just the race, and the fairies. In fact, we had this on a podcast a couple of weeks ago where we introduced fairies and all that. And because Lisa and I think Lisa's seen it in her third eye. I've seen him in my third eye, and I've actually seen with not the actual body of the fairy, but the orb, fly into my room while I was doing yoga. Nice. And I saw it picked up on the TV because I was working online with a client, and that's how I saw it, was because I saw it in the TV. But of course, Michael is the skeptic and believes that it's just, stuff from our childhood that is to create fantasy stories from like Peter Pan and all of the mythical ideas and things like that go with it. What is your experience with all of that?
So my experience with fairies is more of an internal connection. I haven't seen them physically with my third eye or my regular eyes, but I experience them very directly internally. So I will tend to connect with their emotions or connect with them on a telepathic level. So when I was, and even when I was writing the book and I did the fairy section, it was hard for me to get through without crying. And I even had a session one time when I was in Japan with a client, and I'm like, wow, this is unusual. I was doing an axiotonal alignment, and I don't usually get a lot of extraneous information during the axiotonal alignment because I'm so focused on something specific. But I was getting so much information with her. And then when I finished, she was talking to the translator. And so I was waiting for them to finish. And I started getting all these waves of memories of being a fairy with her. She was my sister. And I just would start crying. I'm like, get it together, Jamie. She's not going to know why you're crying. And every time, if I had a moment where I wasn't speaking or interacting with her, the memories would start waving back with the emotions. And so finally at the end of the session, I was like, I just have to tell you, you're my fairy sister and I love you. So for me, it is something that is on an experiential level. It just feels so strong and so right. I just have never doubted that connection. And I didn't really pay attention to it when I was younger, because I wasn't open psychically. And now it's something that I absolutely love, that connection. And as soon as I started opening up psychically when I come across the people that have a lot of fairy or elven resonance, I've always been really drawn to them. So for me, it's something real that is weird.
I had one of our listeners, after listening to, I forget which show, maybe our last one about fairies, but she asked me, what's the difference between fairies and dragons? And I really don't have an answer other than they're just completely two different things,
Yeah, it's two entirely different species.
But I think they serve the same purpose as far as, being there to help guide us and, protect us and direct us. So
yeah,
just two different species.
Yes. Similar purposes. The fairies are very much focused on support and nurturing things with emotion. They have a lot of love and joy and playfulness, and sometimes that playfulness might seem a little not sweet to some people, but in my experience, it's always sweet. The dragons are an entirely different species that they are no longer in our physical dimension, and either of them. And we actually, humans, used to be able to interact more directly with the elemental races, but as our vibration lowered, we lost that connection. In fact, one time when I was in Japan and doing the light language course, I do an elemental transmission, and the fairies came through, and it was so emotional. I had to keep stopping to gather myself in order to speak to them. This is even before I had that fairy memory with that one client. But they were talking about how the Japanese people were some of the last people that could still see them and interact with them, because they were kind of separated on an island and not as influenced yet by the collective change. Yeah. But we used to be able to interact with them, and the dragons, their focus is a little different. They carry that mastery of all of the elements. And so they're generally a little stronger or a little more focused around less about nurturing and more about empowering.
Interesting.
Yeah, you know, when you were saying how we've lowered our vibration so that we can't see them, as soon as you said that, my whole top of my head was tingling.
Yeah. And now we're raising our vibrations so that we can interact more consciously with what's currently the subtle realms.
Yeah, Michael's been desperately trying to raise his vibration so he can he's like, I want to know what's going on that you and Lisa are seeing or feeling or whatever. But and he's actually been doing a good job. He's starting to at least connect with certain things. But
Sure.
He's hardly our skeptic anymore.
Oh, believe me, I'm not on the fairy bandwagon yet.
Well, yeah.
I'm just waiting for one to fly in and dance on your forehead.
Yeah. The mosquito, I usually slap it.
Yeah. Oh, well, Lisa, did you have any other questions that you wanted to ask Jamye?
I don't. I think she covered everything, and I so appreciate it. It's been just great having you on, and I'm going to read your book again. I just finished it, and I want to start over.
Thank you.
Michael, do you have any questions?
No, it was very informative. Thank you.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much, Jamye. Did you want to share with our audience any upcoming workshops? And like, I know you also work with people to help them open up to light language. You offer courses. Did you want to just discuss a little bit about that and let our audience know where they can find you?
Yeah, so everything is on my website, jamyeprice.com. It's spelled kind of weird, JamyePrice. And there's so much there. There's a vast library of information. I have a mailing list where I send out either a weekly mailing, or you can choose to just receive it monthly. And I talk about what's currently going on for Ascension. There's a light language video that goes along with that. So there's so much there. I'm constantly teaching classes, and even have a subscription program for that. And then I teach light language different places around the world. I always teach it in October in Sedona. And then I try to do, I'm in Japan once a year, and then I try to do at least one other foreign location, and I may possibly add another East Coast location in 2018. I also do private healing sessions, so whatever you feel drawn to, there's so much there. I've been obsessed with the Ascension path for quite a long time, and so I have a lot of love for the whole journey and helping people through it.
Yeah, well, I mean, your book is incredible. So to our audience, if you would like to get Jamye's book, it's available on Amazon. However, if you want to get the print copy, we suggest going over to her website directly to get a print version, as there seems to be some sort of issue with getting the print version through Amazon. But
yeah, I don't sell it there.
Yeah. It's funny. I actually was buying your book to give to Lisa as a gift. And when I saw the print price, because I know Lisa prefers print books, it was like $300 or something. And I was like, wow, is there gold in that? Like with transmission come through the writing? I don't know. But yeah, so for our audience, please head over to her actual website if you'd like to purchase the print copy, if you like to hold your book in your hands, just like Lisa does.
It's only $300.
Yeah.
No, it's a normal book price on my website. I tried the Amazon thing for a little bit, and their system is just not set up for authors, and it was just not working all around. So the Kindle version is available there. That works wonderfully.
That's the one I got.
Yeah. And then the print version for now is only available on my website.
Yeah. So to our audience, you can do that. And I highly suggest the book. It's one of my top 3 favorite books I've ever read. There's incredible information in it. And not only that, but if you're interested in raising your vibrations, all you need to do is read this book. I can't even express it enough. I know I've told you this before, Jamie, but I can't believe how quickly I feel my whole entire body vibrating so fast and quick and high vibe just from reading a simple paragraph. It just happens so fast. So if for nothing else, that's a great reason to buy your book. So we're going to leave all of the information in our show notes. So we'll have all the links to everything there. And so for audience, if you need to find anything, we'll leave all the links there. And that's about it. So thank you so much, Jamie, for joining us. It was a great show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay. Well, thank you. We'll catch everyone next time. Have a great week.
Bye, everyone.